July 4th, 2005, 11:10 p.m. The brilliance of the seas hums under the moonlight, its decks alive with music and the clinking of champagne glasses. In the casino, George Allen Smith IV, tall and broad-shouldered, leans across a blackjack table, his laughter echoing above the shuffle of cards. At 26, George is still glowing with the excitement of his wedding just days earlier. To the strangers at the table, he is simply another passenger enjoying the Mediterranean cruise. To those who know him, he is the embodiment of charm and generosity, outgoing, magnetic, and perhaps a little too reckless when alcohol flows. By his side that night is his wife, Jennifer Hagel. Blonde, composed, and just as spirited, she keeps close as George mingles freely with fellow passengers. They've only been married since June 25, 2005, just over a week ago, and now their honeymoon has carried them through the ports of Greece and Turkey, each day a postcard of romance. Yet this night will be the last they spend together. July 5th, 2005, 12:45 a.m. The couple moves to the disco lounge on deck 13, where neon lights pulse to thumping music. Here George connects with a group of young Russian-American men from Brooklyn, Josh Asking and the Rosenberg cousins, Rusty Kaufman and Gregory Rosenberg. They drink heavily, their camaraderie fueled by alcohol and bravado. Witnesses later say George seemed unusually trusting, even careless, with his new companions. He was the kind of guy who thought everyone was his friend, one passenger recalled. 1:50 a.m. Jennifer, perhaps tired from the endless rounds of drinks, excuses herself from the group. Witnesses see her leave the lounge and return alone to their cabin. But George stays behind with the men. Hours pass. He continues drinking, gambling, and eventually stumbles into the early morning. 3:20 a.m. Several passengers on deck 9 are startled awake by loud voices and the sound of scuffling. One remembers hearing a heated argument outside their door. Male voices, thick with tension. Moments later, a thud shakes the wall. It sounded like someone being shoved. The passenger would later tell investigators. 3:45 a.m. George is seen by crew members being escorted through the hallway, barely able to walk on his own. His head lolls, his steps unsteady. He is not with Jennifer. Instead, he is in the company of the same Russian-American group, guiding him back toward his cabin. Security cameras catch glimpses of them along the corridor, their arms gripping him as if steadying or controlling him. 4:02 a.m. Neighbors in the cabins surrounding George and Jennifer's suite hear raised voices. A man's muffled cries, then silence. Minutes later, another passenger hears what they describe as a loud scraping noise, followed by a sickening thud outside. They assume it's drunken passengers causing trouble. No one opens their doors. 4:30 a.m. Jennifer wakes alone in her bed. Confused, she calls softly for George, but there is no answer. The sheets are cool, his side of the bed empty. She steps to the balcony door, which is ajar, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. She leans out, calling his name into the darkness, but the Mediterranean swallows her voice. George is gone. 4:45 a.m. A Turkish crew member discovers something chilling. On the white metal canopy of deck 7, directly below the Smith's balcony, a dark pool of blood spreads across the surface. Thick, heavy streaks suggest impact, as though a body had hit hard before tumbling into the sea. The discovery sparks alarm. Ship officers rush to the scene. Some try to downplay it, claiming the blood could have another explanation, but whispers spread quickly among the crew. A passenger has gone overboard. 5:15 a.m. Security begins searching the ship. George's wallet and passport are still in the cabin. His wedding ring glints on the nightstand. Jennifer is frantic, insisting he would never leave without her. Something's wrong, she tells officers, her voice shaking. 6 a.m. Word spreads through the passengers like wildfire. Groups gather in hushed clusters, speculation buzzing. Was it an accident? Did he fall? Or was there foul play? People don't just vanish from a cruise ship, one passenger mutters. But they do, and they did. By mid-morning, Royal Caribbean officials attempt to calm the situation. Announcements are made that the ship will continue to Kuzazi, Turkey, its next port of call. But behind the polished facade of vacation luxury, investigators scramble. Turkish police are informed as the ship sails in international waters under a Bahamian flag. US authorities are notified too, though their involvement remains tangled in jurisdictional red tape. The result? Precious hours are lost. Hours that could have preserved evidence. Hours that could have questioned key witnesses before memories faded or stories changed. July 5, 2005, 11 a.m. The blood on the canopy becomes the image burned into every passenger's mind. Crew members scrub at it quickly, some say too quickly, as though trying to erase what it revealed. Photographs are taken by a few witnesses, images that would later become vital to public scrutiny. Meanwhile, Jennifer is questioned for hours. She insists she returned to the cabin around 2 a.m., alone, and fell asleep. She remembers nothing until waking to find George gone. Some investigators quietly question her account. Why hadn't she noticed the commotion outside the cabin? Why hadn't she raised the alarm sooner? For Jennifer, grief and suspicion collide in those endless hours. She is a widow before her honeymoon is even finished. Back in Connecticut, July 5th begins like any other day. George's parents, George III and Maureen Smith, wake to the sound of a phone ringing. The voice on the other end delivers a nightmare. Their son has vanished at sea. In disbelief, they beg for details. What do you mean gone? He's on a cruise ship. He can't just be gone. But he is. That evening, as the Brilliance of the Seas docks in Turkey, local authorities board the vessel. They inspect the cabin, noting overturned furniture and bedding that suggests a struggle. They interview the Russian-American group last seen with George. Their stories shift and weave, raising more questions than answers. Yet, without jurisdictional clarity, the investigation falters before it truly begins. And so, George Smith becomes another name on the growing list of passengers who vanish from cruise ships each year. Cases often unsolved, families left adrift in grief. But this case is different. The blood, the witnesses, the conflicting accounts, it all points to more than an accident. By the time the sun sets on July 5th, George's body is still missing, claimed by the sea. Jennifer stands alone on the deck, her face pale, her wedding ring glinting against the railing. Around her, passengers whisper, some with pity, others with suspicion. And in the shadows of the ship, the men who were last seen with George laugh among themselves, their freedom intact, their secret sealed. What began as a honeymoon has become a headline. And as investigators wrestle with competing jurisdictions and conflicting testimonies, the Smith family braces for a long fight. A fight not only to find out what happened to their son, but to prove that his death was no accident. George Smith boarded the Brilliance of the Seas as a newlywed. By morning, he was gone without a trace, except for a trail of blood that told a story no one wanted to believe. July 6, 2005, 9 a.m. Kuzazi, Turkey. Passengers file off the Brilliance of the Seas to the sound of vendors and gulls, but the atmosphere is heavy. The missing groom's story has spread through the ship like wildfire, the rumors changing shape with every retelling. He fell overboard, some say. No, he was pushed, others insist. At the center of the storm is Jennifer Hagel, still in shock, still repeating the words, George wouldn't just disappear. Turkish police board the vessel, joined by FBI agents flown in from the US, but jurisdiction muddies the water. Because the ship is registered in the Bahamas, Bahamian officials technically have authority. Turkey, as the port of call, also claims a stake. And the FBI? They are there only because George was American. The result is chaos, competing investigations, different rules of evidence, and a crime scene already compromised. Blood had been scrubbed, the cabin cleaned, and key suspects allowed to wander freely. July 6, 2005, 2:30 p.m. Interviews begin with the Russian-American men who were last seen with George. Josh Asking, young and athletic, admits to drinking heavily with him. Rusty and Gregory Rosenberg confirm the same, but their stories shift with each telling. One says George left to return to his cabin around 4 a.m. Another insists he never saw him again after the disco. None of them can explain the thuds, the cries, or the blood. Yet investigators notice something chilling. The men seem amused. A fellow passenger recalls seeing them the next day, laughing on the deck, mocking the situation. "We gave him a paragliding lesson," one reportedly joked. July 7th, 2005, 10:15 a.m. Connecticut. George's parents, George III and Maureen Smith, sit in their living room surrounded by reporters. Their faces are pale, their voices raw. They plead for answers, for justice. "Our son is not an accident," George's father insists. "Something happened on that ship. Someone knows what happened." Their grief soon becomes national news, the story of the vanished groom turning from a local tragedy into an international mystery. Meanwhile, Jennifer Hagel faces her own scrutiny. To the media, she is the grieving widow. To some investigators, she is a person of interest. Why did she return alone to the cabin? Why did she claim she slept through the noise of a struggle? Did she know more than she admitted? Though no evidence ever ties her to George's disappearance, the whispers linger, and Jennifer remains trapped in a fog of suspicion and grief. August 2005, FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C. The FBI begins piecing together fragments of evidence. Security footage shows George with the Russian group. Witnesses place him drunk, barely standing, in their care. The blood on the canopy, the overturned furniture, the muffled cries, all point to foul play. Yet without a body, without a confession, the case drifts. The ocean holds its secrets tightly. 2006 to 2007. The case grows colder. Cruise lines come under fire as the Smith family accuses Royal Caribbean of covering up evidence. Lawsuits are filed. Congressional hearings on cruise ship safety include George's story as a central example. His parents sit before lawmakers, holding photos of their son, demanding reform. Cruise lines hide behind foreign flags, they testify, and families like ours are left with nothing. Their pain ignites debate on the responsibilities of cruise operators when crimes occur at sea. But still, no arrests. July 2009, Brooklyn, New York. A bombshell breaks. A secret FBI recording emerges of the Russian-American men boasting about George's death. In a taped conversation, one voice, allegedly Gregory Rosenberg, claims George was drunk, that they had taken him back to his cabin, and that he went over the side. Another voice laughs about George's wife, making crude remarks. But the tape is murky, its authenticity debated, its admissibility questionable. Still, it breathes new life into the investigation. 2011, 6 years later. Jim Walker, a maritime attorney, publishes scathing reports questioning the cruise line's conduct. He argues evidence was destroyed, witnesses silenced, and security measures lacking. "The truth was lost at sea," he writes. George's family agrees. For them, every year without answers is another wound that refuses to heal. 2012, the FBI releases a statement. They have re-interviewed over 100 witnesses, analyzed the blood, and reviewed the recordings. Yet they cannot announce charges. Officially, George Smith's disappearance remains unsolved. Unofficially, agents confide to the family that they believe foul play is undeniable, but proving it in court is another matter. 2015, the 10-year mark. On July 5, 2015, a candlelight vigil is held in Greenwich, Connecticut. Friends, family, and supporters gather with photographs of George, his smiling face illuminated by flickering candles. His father, now visibly aged by grief, speaks softly, 10 years, and still no justice. But we will never stop fighting. 2019, a quiet development. The FBI, still keeping the file open, begins testing DNA on items preserved from the scene. The family's hopes rise again. Could modern science finally answer what old investigations could not? Yet, as of now, nothing definitive is released. And so the story lingers, half-truths swirling like the waves that claimed George's body. Was he murdered by the men who mocked his death? Did Jennifer know more than she revealed? Did the cruise line erase vital clues to protect their reputation? Each theory feeds the mystery, Each unanswered question fuels the anger of a family still searching for closure. July 5th, 2023, 18 years later. George's mother stands again at the shoreline of Long Island Sound, staring across the water that took her son. "He was my boy," she whispers to a reporter. "I still dream he'll walk back through the door." Her voice cracks, the cameras roll, and the world is reminded. This is not just a story of a man lost at sea. It is the story of a family robbed of truth, of a bride haunted by suspicion, of a justice system tangled in bureaucracy. The George Smith case remains unsolved. His body was never recovered. His death remains a question mark, floating somewhere between accident and murder. And yet, the legacy of his disappearance changed everything. Laws were written, crews safety questioned, and families more cautious of what lies behind the shimmering promises of luxury vacations. George boarded a ship as a husband, a son, and a dreamer. He left as a ghost, a mystery that still whispers across the ocean waves. What really happened on the Brilliance of the seas? Here at Crimes Uncoded, we ask not just who killed George Smith, but why justice has remained out of reach for nearly 2 decades.